Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Take Back My Brain. I am your host, Laurie Hammer, and I have a very special guest with me today. It is Gary Jordan. And I've known Gary and his wife for a little bit now. And I would say I am super excited to interview him because not only do I feel like I admire the work that he's done, but I feel like I can also call him my friend now. And so this is really exciting to get to kind of pick his brain. Gary has been a clinical psychologist for over 47 years. And I find that to be fascinating and amazing to stay in the same profession. And he's still sane and he still has a lot more to share with the world. So, Gary, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's really a pleasure to be here, Laurie. And yes, I
Oh,
agree. It's good. Yeah, I consider you friend. Absolutely.
yes, absolutely. So, I have to know, Gary, how did you get into clinical psychology?
Well, go back to when I was a teenager, and teenage adolescence is a tumultuous time, and it was for me too. And
Hmm.
I was a very angry and rebellious teenage boy, very adolescent. I mean, you were always doing stuff and getting in trouble with my mother and my father and what they wanted me to do and what I didn't want to do. And I didn't know why I was so angry. And I met a man through the church. He was running what was called at the time the North Dallas Youth Cooperative Ministry.
Okay.
Four different churches working together. And working with him, I discovered why I was so angry. And he helped me figure out what to do about that anger. And it really turned my life around. It
Wow.
brought life back into my life, and I was excited about where I was going.
Yeah.
I decided I want to be able to do and help other people because I know there's other people out there that were feeling the same way I was. This was in the um, early 70s in Dallas. So it was the 60s in the rest of the world. Then
Okay.
in the 70s, didn't get here until
Right.
the 70s. So that, and I set out on my course to become a clinical psychologist. He said, I went to him, I said, what do I do to be able to do what you've done with me?
Hmm.
Go get your PhD in clinical psychology. So I started down that path, took a couple detours, made some questions, rechecked it and kept
Like we
coming back to
always do.
the path.
Yeah.
Yep, like we always do, and kept coming back to the path over and over and over again. So that's how I
Wow.
got started. Yeah,
Well, and you've been in this profession for 47 years.
I have.
So clearly you love it.
I do.
Yeah. So how do you navigate 47 years of clinical psychology? Because that's a lot of people's problems.
Yes, it
And to
is.
not take it on, right?
Well, it's interesting. That's you learn, you grow, and you evolve in this profession, or you leave, or you get calloused, or you get cynical.
Sure.
But there's certainly the I like to describe it as, when I graduated with my doctorate, I had gone from first grade to doctorate without a break, and
Wow.
I was ready for a break.
I bet
But
you
it
were.
also meant I didn't have a whole lot of experience in the real world, of what it was like not to be a student. But I, was a young whippersnapper. I was 25 years old when I got my degree.
Mm.
I figured I could solve anybody's problems. I could
Sure.
change
Take on the
anybody,
world.
take on the world. And I quickly learned, or maybe not so quickly learned, that that's not what this profession is about. It's really not
Mm.
about fixing people. It's not about changing the world. I really see it now as it's helping people to become more of who they already are and who they actually are, and removing what they have learned in the
Mm.
world that covers over who they are.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
Well, and I love in your website it talks about the power of perception and the things that you've written, with your colleague. Um,
uh-huh.
it is about our perception. It's not about fixing things. It's about shifting, people to call it your mindset or, whatever it might be. But
Yeah,
perception is such a good word for that.
yeah. One of the phrases that I if when people work with me, they hear multiple times, is that the pain of life, and the pain that you feel, and the things that you have struggled with, that's real.
Hmm.
But we tell ourselves a story based on our perception
Right.
about why that happened, or what it is that caused us to experience the pain. And most of the times when people come to see me, I would say all the time when they come to see me, but most of the time, those stories are what's causing the problem. The stories aren't accurate.
Mm.
So the pain is real, but the story is not accurate. So the work, a lot of the work is helping people to understand what the pain really is,
Ah, gotcha.
how to heal that pain, and how to, I like to say reconnect back to source because that's where most of the pain is really coming from in the big first place.
Right. Well, that's fascinating.
I
And
didn't answer your question. I'm sorry, interrupting you, but I didn't answer your question about how I sustained this for 47 years.
yeah.
Um, you mentioned the work that I do with my colleague. It's called Perceptual Style Theory, and it talks about different ways people see the world. And one of the ways that I see the world, the style is called activity. We're fascinated and very curious about the world, but we get as soon as we learn something, we want have to move on. We have to go find something else that's
Right.
fascinating and curious. So I have sustained 47 years by moving into different aspects and facets of being a professional and a clinical psychologist.
Okay.
Lots of days, not all been private practice. I started out in private practice. I moved into corporate consulting. I moved from corporate consulting into uh, neuropsychological testing, and from neuropsychological testing, I did some community mental health along the way, and finally back to private practice, and this is where I know I'm going to end my career.
Wow. That's
Yeah,
amazing, Gary. Yeah, it's
thank you.
quite the path you've been on. And so about 10 years ago, you
Hmm.
kind of shifted things because you had a major life event
I
um,
did.
happen to you. And can you share that with us and how that has kind of shaped the rest of your life since then?
I'd be happy to. Yeah. Um, 10 years ago, my first wife passed away from breast cancer.
Hmm.
And in she had it's really interesting. I met her in college, and the woman who lived next door to her in college, her name is Alyssa Zimmerman. Um, I met her on the exact same day that I met my future wife.
Amazing.
As she got sick, my wife, and it was clear that things were not going the way we had hoped they would go with the treatment.
Yeah,
She reconnected with Alyssa, who is a very powerful psychotherapist herself in her own right, and started working with her. When my wife passed away, in my grief, I knew I needed somebody. I knew I needed to pull back, to heal, and I needed someone to give me a new perspective.
sure.
And when I called Alyssa to tell her that Sarah, my wife, had passed away. Um, I said, where do I go from here? She said, well, I can help you with that.
Hmm.
And so she started to work with me to move through the grief, but she's the one, but she introduced a new way of looking for me, new vocabulary for sure, of looking at what the psychotherapy process is all about.
Wow.
I talk about to my clients and non-clients, I have a file in my head called "What is this process really all about?" And there's about 1,000 different entries in there but they all interact to me and intertwine in the same way. So over the first couple of years, post my wife's passing away, I worked intensely with Alyssa Zimmerman, and she has worked, and then I began to train with her because the work that she did was so powerful. So,
Okay.
like to, anything I say from about what I do now, I have to give the intellectual property rights and the recognition to Alyssa. She's an
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
So tell us about that new perspective and what you're using now that shifted for you.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a refinement. For me, it's a refinement of that first learning that I can't fix people, but
Okay.
it doesn't mean I didn't stop trying. So
Right.
it's it's one of those things
I
that you have
understand
to
that.
learn. You have to learn over and over again. But it's the I would call it's a developmental view of what psychotherapy is, and that is that what gets on our way is that we all go through a process of growing up, and in that growing up, we develop and create an identity,
Hmm.
and that identity you can call it by several different words, but it's our ego, it's our um, uh, it's our identity, but fundamentally it's a story. We're back to stories again. It's a story that we tell the world about who we are. And we tell that and we tell ourselves that same story. And the reason that we tell ourselves that story is because in the process of growing up, we get the phrase we use is we get wounded, we get
Mm.
hurt.
Mm-hmm.
And that wound, I like to take it all the way back is that, when we're born, if you allow me, and
Sure.
interrupt if you need to, as you
Go
need to,
ahead.
you
This is
know,
great. Keep going, Gary.
when we're born, we're fully connected to God, but we
Mm-hmm.
don't have the, we don't have the, and that we always stay connected, but we're not aware of the connection. I want to put that in there pretty quickly.
So true. Yes.
Yeah, but we don't have the consciousness to contemplate that connection. And as we grow up and learn to be who we are, we interact with our parents. They teach us how to be a member of our family. They teach us how to be a member of society. And you use a hand graphic. We were born with this enormously wide um, um, range of capacity for experience, and the process of growing up narrows that experience down
Mm.
as we learn to be who Laurie or Gary or whoever
Right.
we are. That process is painful because you get told no, you get
Mm-hmm.
punished, you can't do that, you're not allowed to do, you can't do that and be, in my case, you can't do that and be a Jordan.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing we learn how to be a Jordan, in my case, or your last name for whoever's listening to this.
Right.
And it's a wounding process. It's a necessary process because you have to develop that ego, that observing ego, in order to be able to have the consciousness to function in the world.
Okay.
Without an ego, we would remain infantile, if that is.
Right.
But the ego also gets in the way because we start believing that we are that we are the center of
Mm-hmm.
our life, because that's what the ego tells us is really important. And the ego doesn't let us see the pain that we've pushed away and hidden from ourselves as we tell our story to the world about how wonderful we are and how things we do while we carry this hidden stuff away inside. And so to me, psychotherapy is a long way to get to what psychotherapy is really all about. It's a spiritual journey for me.
Mm-hmm.
It's helping you to heal, reclaim that the pain was real, but change the story you told yourself. And the stories we tell ourselves are multiple. Are I'm not good enough, or I didn't get to be who I wanted to be when I was young. People didn't love me. People didn't like me, and we look for reasons and to blame on why we don't grow and prosper and
Mm-hmm.
become fully who we are.
Right.
And this the process is to say, to change that story, you have to heal that. You have to go back and heal that pain
Yep.
that you've hidden away from yourself. When you heal that pain, here comes the magic. When you heal that pain, you have that reconnection to God.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the exciting part. It's not that the connection was not there, but you feel the
You can
connection.
acknowledge it now.
You
Yeah.
can acknowledge it, and now you have the observing ego to be able to understand what that connection is. It's a re it's a reconnecting. In some ways you can say it's what's being meant by being reborn again. Becoming a
Mm-hmm.
born again Christian is you're being reborn back into that connection
Right.
with your creator.
Right. And that's where you're going to change your story, right?
And that's where you change your story
Yeah.
because you realize the story isn't all about you.
There you go. We
And
get so self-centered, don't
oh
we?
my
I
gosh.
mean, unknowingly, we get
Yeah.
self-centered and, like if we have an argument with our spouse or whatever, and then we're like, oh, he hurt me here and there, and he didn't do this and he didn't do that. Well,
Yeah.
taking a step back, once you get a little more mature, you can take a step back and go, well, maybe I facilitated that, you know?
Yes.
Right. So
Well,
you get to change your story. So it's not,
absolutely.
you don't hang
And
on to the blame or the hurt anymore.
yeah. And as long as I call it child mind, or the hurt boys and the hurt girls, depending on
Yeah.
your gender, it's the child mind that the life should be the way I want it to be. Life should be the way I think it should be. And When it isn't, that's when the hurt gets reactivated and we get belligerent, we get self-righteous, we get angry, we get blaming, we point our finger and we look for what did you do to me that makes me that's causing me to feel this way, and you better change the way you're acting. And the work is really, that's what I call it, the work. The work is realizing that that is a remnant of what I needed to do to survive my childhood. I had to
Interesting.
I had to push that pain away because it was too much. As a
Mm-hmm.
child, you can't handle that kind of pain, so you push it away. It's not true anymore. You're old enough, you can manage it. And as you reclaim your ability to handle those kinds of issues and to see the world as much as possible, the way that it really is, then as you begin to heal that pain, and I'm lost my train of thought.
That's okay.
Sorry.
I would think about the phrase where it's like, suck it up, buttercup phrase. My daughter actually has a t-shirt that says that because she
Uh-huh.
doesn't like drama. She's like, suck it up, buttercup.
Yeah.
Life is fine, right? Life is like you can move on from whatever has happened to you. Um, and at the same time, we don't want to discount what has happened to people, correct? Like, because
Absolutely
you want
not.
to acknowledge that pain, and it's not
Yes.
that, it's not real. So, what do you say to someone, Gary, who is trying to figure out life? Like they have a lot of shoulds, like this life shouldn't be this hard, or this shouldn't happen to me, or all these things always happen to me. Of course, the car broke because all these things always happen to me.
Right.
Like, how do you speak to somebody in that state of mind? So their pain is real, but
Hmm.
that you look at their life and you're like, man, your life is amazing. Like you've got good kids, you've got a good wife, you have a good job. So why are they still stuck in that? And how do you help get them out of there?
Yeah. Well, the pain, I'm sorry, again, I've lost my train of thought and you just dropped it. When people come to see me, they almost always come in with the what I call the if then. And
Mm.
it's if I know where I should be. I know what I was told life was going to be, and that's not what it is. And it's not because that's not what my life is. It's not because that's not what life is. It's because there's something wrong with me. There's
Ah,
something I'm not doing. There's something that I'm not accomplishing. There's something I haven't learned or mastered that is preventing me from attaining this destination that we talk about. I'm getting there. I'm getting close. And I always say to
hmm.
people, where are you going?
Right.
You're there now. There is no there you're going to. Or
Right.
there's only one there that we're all going to, and I'm in no hurry particularly to get there.
Exactly.
So um, the first part of the process is helping them to understand that their attempt to fix the world, to fix themselves, so that they are accomplishing and achieving what they thought the world was going to be, um, is not a possible process.
Mm.
Okay, because we
Hmm.
what happens is that's the if then. If I can earn more money, if I can have a better job, if I met the right person, then life would be okay, then life would be perfect.
Sure.
They don't question the goal they've set up, which is that life will be happy and wonderful. And I always say a Miller Lite commercial where everyone's
Right.
drinking beer and having
Yeah, Fee, it's all
barbecue,
good.
and everyone's swimming and life is gorgeous. They don't question that. We've bought that goal. So if we're not reaching the goal, it must be in the if.
Mm.
If that I'm doing is not matching up. So the first thing we talk about is the fact that happiness is not a goal. We've been taught in our society for the
Yep.
last, I say, 250 years that happiness is a goal and a right.
Hmm.
Happiness is an experience. Okay, we feel happy
Yes.
and it goes away. We
Hmm.
feel sadness and it goes away.
Hmm.
We feel joy and it goes away. We feel anger and it goes away. So life is not, the emotional experiences aren't goals to search for. The goal is, how do I sit in the presence of God within me
Hmm.
and accept all that comes to me as it comes to me, rather than demanding it be what I want it to be. I know I use that phrase a lot, but it's a big one because a lot of us get caught into it was this, the where I lost my train of thought a little while back was, I call it a child mind fight. It's what you were describing with your husband. And it goes something like this. You need to understand that I, blah, 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 blah. And the other person goes, yeah, 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 I get that. But what you need to understand is that, and then they fill in the blank for them. And the person goes, yeah, I understand that. But what you need to understand, and it just goes, it's just a circle eight back and
Yeah.
forth. No one's understanding anybody because everybody is self-righteously saying, I've been hurt. I'm justified in what I feel, and you need to accommodate me.
hmm So if you're living in that situation, you kind of keep going on this hamster wheel. Do
Mhm.
you have any suggestions, say, to one of the spouses or, one of the family members? Like, how do you get out of that cycle so that you can actually move forward?
Well, that's the work of the therapy, and
Gotcha.
it requires going back and opening up that part of you. I really truly deeply believe in the unconscious. Is that, and we push things into the unconscious
hmm
that are overwhelming or were overwhelming for us at the time, so that it's like we have this frustration, this pain, this hurt that threatens our relationship with our parents as little children. And people go, that's not real. I go, yeah, it's very real. Children feeling terrified they're going to lose mom. It's like I said, did
Oh,
you ever get
yeah.
lost at the fair? Did you ever get lost at the fair when you were a little kid or something? And how terrified were you that life was over?
Yeah.
And it's overwhelming, and
Yeah.
it's beyond the capacity to handle. And so we push that pain away. And that's where the woundedness and the self-judgment comes in, because we start telling ourselves that I'm sorry, back up. It's like when you get crosswise with a parent, you have a choice to decide who's wrong in this situation, me
hmm
or my parent. Well, there's really no choice
Right.
because you can't threaten the relationship. So you always choose that you're wrong.
hmm
And so we start judging ourselves. I call them the big four judgments. We're not lovable, we're not interesting, we're not worthy, and we're not enough.
Mm.
And it's trying to heal those by going out into the world and earning more. That's we get caught up. The ego tells us
You. Yeah.
you can feel better about you if you make more money. You can feel better about you if you have the right job. And that's that if then that I mentioned to before. And until you start looking at where does self-judgment come from? What drives that sense that I'm not enough?
hmm
uh, it's only at that point that you can begin opening up to healing that part of you that you pushed away from because you couldn't manage it. So the process, this is my long-winded way of answering your question. It's a process of getting people to go back and re-feel the pain
hmm
that they felt, that they pushed away into the unconscious, without judgment, without without and without um, trying to distract yourself from it, because
Which
that's
is easy to do.
which is very easy to do,
Yeah.
um, and without drama as much as possible. Because what
Well, no,
happens,
there's a tall order.
yeah, because that's what we catch the feeling, we distort it with the judgments, and then we jump into drama as a way to justify the feelings that we have, deep down inside. So the process is to get to that pain, and then I say that the feeling is the healing. Feeling the
Mm-hmm.
pain rather than turning from the pain. And
Yeah,
that's
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 good.
that's my job as a riverboat guide. I've been down this path. I know what you're going through. I can't tell you the number of times I've had clients who've been seeing me for a while, and you get into a session with them, and they've been crying, and they're anxious, and they're miserable, and they're hurting, and they say this has to go away. And I said, no, this is what we've been trying to get to for the last whatever how amount of time we've been working together. Is this the pain that you're feeling right now? This is what you need to feel right now so you don't continue to suffer.
Mm.
because
Yeah.
this is the real pain of your life.
Yeah. Alleviate that suffering.
Hmm.
Yeah. I think that's from my experience anyway with my clients, we talk about, hey, do you have a therapist that you're working with or whatever? And they're like, no, I don't want to go down that rabbit trail. I don't want to play the blame game. I don't want to, I don't want to go over that again and again,
Yes. Yeah.
again. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, understandably so.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. What I say to people, we're not here to blame anybody. Your parents did the best they could to raise you, the best they knew how to do that. That may have
100%.
not been very good. That may have been exceptional. But I do believe that parents do the best that they can. But they're wounded too.
Mm-hmm.
All of us are as human beings. I don't think it's possible to grow up without some kind of wounding because that's part of the deal. And it's like our development gets arrested. We stop as like 12-year-olds, and we
Mm-hmm.
need to learn how to become, rather than continue to be emotional children, how to become emotional adults. And
Right.
emotional adults can handle those pains. So it's like when I tell people, yes, we will talk about what happened when you were a child, how your mother, how you resented or got angry with your mother, how she hurt you, how she may have punished you, um, the things that she did to you that you wish she hadn't done, but we're not blaming her.
Right.
It's descriptive. And it's you need to be able to look at it to understand that the pain that we're talking about is real.
Mm-hmm.
Back to our pain is real again, is that yeah, you really did hurt, but you decided something about that. I'm repeating myself because here
Yeah.
we are again. You decided something about that that's not accurate. And as we can change the way you look at your pain, changes the way that you deal with your life. You, you,
Right.
you stop looking at yourself as a victim and you start looking at yourself as a grown-up human being.
Which is a beautiful thing.
It's
And
a beautiful thing.
it
Yeah.
reminds me, I have clients that come to me and they're like, oh yeah, this runs in my family, right? This runs in my family, whether it's heart disease or thyroid issues or whatever. And just teaching people or empowering people to make a different choice, right? Change your story. So
Change your
there's so
story.
many things we can do nutritionally, from a physical perspective, and our emotions play into all of that. So we just change our story. So if you don't want heart disease, there's lots of things we can do for that, right? And so
Uh-huh.
you don't have to follow that same path. Or it's kind of
Right.
like, the Bible talks about breaking off generational curses and things like,
Yes.
let's break it off.
Let's
Let's just
break it.
stop the buck right now and just
Yeah,
change your whole story and, move on to a higher level so that you can do what God created you to do.
absolutely.
Yeah,
And the story is so powerful because yeah, I believe that we stories are very important to human beings.
very.
We tell ourselves a story, and to think of our life as a story is kind of a radical way to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
it's only by thinking of it as a story that you can see that you have the power to change their story. And when you change your story and the way you tell it, and you change the way your life is. So, it's like you move into a situation and you were talking about no wonder the car broke down because that's always what happens to me
Mm-hmm.
because that's the part of your story you're focusing on.
Right.
Okay. So let's learn let's help you learn how to focus on a different part of your story.
Yeah,
Now, the origin story, the story that you grew up with your family, is a pretty powerful story for all of us.
it is.
I
It is.
call it, it's like, wax melted into fabric.
Right?
It never
It's not coming
completely
out.
goes away.
Yeah, not coming out.
But you can learn to manage it.
Yeah.
And the part of you that I call the child mind, the hurt was they want it. They want you to manage it. They just don't believe you can.
Mm-hmm.
So helping that part of you learn that you have the adult capacity and you're going to claim that adult capacity to manage life as effectively and as much as possible the way that it actually is rather than the way you want it to be,
Right.
the more effective you're going to be in your life and the more you're going to be able to love yourself. And that's loving yourself is the key to being able to love and deeply connect with others.
Right.
And
And people think that's such a selfish thing to say, but God is love, right? And he
God is
created us
love.
in his image, right? And so he loves us so much. And so he sees us in this radical, love bubble. I don't know what else to
Yeah,
say about that, right?
yeah,
You know?
yeah.
And depending on what you believe, I believe that he sees us through the cross of Jesus Christ, through that death and resurrection. And so he can only see us as beautiful, as a masterpiece, as holy, as loved and blessed and adopted and all of those things. And for us not to love ourselves is rejecting that. Like it's always
Absolutely.
there for us, but we just have
Yes.
to walk into that identity
Yeah.
and know that that's our story.
Yeah.
That's who we are, not what happened to us, but who we were created to be and how God sees us.
And how do you, so again, out of my file in my head, one of the things that therapy is all about is how do you get out of the way of what should naturally coming through you?
Yeah.
And that's the work of therapy, to get you out of the way, to get mis your misinformed story more aligned with the flow of God
Yeah.
through you. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so good. I had a therapist when I was in my early 20s and I was overcoming my eating disorder and all sorts of things. And that was one of the things that she taught me was, okay, so and my parents were amazing, right? But my mom was sick all the time, and so her reaction to life wasn't optimal. We'll just put it that
Hmm.
way. It was a
Hmm.
little bit dysfunctional. And she couldn't see it, and it's kind of our family dynamic, right? And but she came from such hurt, right? And as I grew older, I understood that more. But my therapist said to me, she's like, "So what are you going to do to change your story?"
Yeah.
That's exactly what she said. She'll let's
Wow.
change your story.
Yeah.
Everything that you're talking about right now. And I'm like, okay. And so everything in my life, to the best of my ability, has been to because I would, come home from school and my mom would be so sick, so I didn't know what mood she'd be in. Or I would stand in her doorway and I didn't know if she was dead or alive because she had so many surgeries. Like I was so scared as a kid. Like is my mom going to wake up tomorrow because she just had another surgery, and I would see all these things, and all the pain and the suffering that she went through, and I'm like, that's not going to be my story, with my kids. And so I was terrified to be a mom,
Hmm.
but after you work through those things you're like, okay, I can do it. And
Yes,
I did change my story. My kids have never had to see me like this. Of course, we've, everybody's got struggles and those kind of things, and we see
of
those
course.
things, but I was just asking my son because I'm writing a book about the cancer diagnosis that I had with a friend of mine who had also had a cancer diagnosis. So we're kind of meshing our stories together. And I asked him, he goes, I don't really have a lot of memory of it because you were just so strong during that time that I didn't really think I was going to lose you. I just thought the Lord would just heal you because that's what you said was going to happen. So that's just what I believed.
Hmm.
And so he goes, he remembered a few times where I was crying. He's like, I never seen you in such a vulnerable situation. But he's like, outside of that, I don't really remember that being a big deal. And so I'm like, well, that was cool because I changed the story. So it was still hard, it was still real. But the story for him at that time was vastly different than my story when I would see my mom in that situation, you
Absolutely.
know?
Yeah.
So I think it's really key to keep that in mind because we have control over that.
Yes.
We can change our mindset and
Yes, we can.
um, change our story.
Yeah.
So, the buck stops here.
Yes, indeed. Those, Tom, brings activated two things in my head. One was that you talk about people who say, "I don't want to go," open that process up and look through it.
Yeah.
Because and I thought of that because that's how you change the story.
Yeah.
I think of the quote, and I've looked and looked for who it really belongs to. It's been attributed to Carl Jung, but I
Okay.
don't know if it really belongs to him or not. And that is the only pain you can avoid is the pain of avoiding your pain.
Mm,
And the pain of avoiding your pain is where symptoms and suffering comes from. It's what
yeah.
they carry about all their life, and they're busy distracting themselves from the pain with this avoidance, and that's what sustains that. So changing the story, when people say, "I don't want to go into that," it's like, well, you don't have to,
Hmm.
but and you don't have to do therapy to change your story, but it helps.
Right.
It's a catalyst. It's an accelerant, if you will, to
Right.
get the story moving along.
Well, it's just
So,
like you when you lost your wife, Sarah. I mean, you could have just curled up in a ball and decided you hated life and never moved on. And I
yep.
mean, I know you. with Marcia, and it's an amazing life the two of you have together, and it was
Thank
because
you.
you opened up to that.
Yes. Yeah. And there's a lot of work involved in not curling up when someone that you
Oh,
care
yeah.
so deeply and so connected to passes away. And but it is it's what opened me up to that, okay, I have not done this work as deeply as I need to do this work. Even
Mm,
after, 40 at that point, what it would have been 37 years of being a therapist, I,
right,
there was more for me to look at. And that's that's why I'm such a, what's the word you want that we use, uh, a proselytizer for for
right.
what Easy taught me. Easy, I'm sorry, that's what I call her, Alyssa Zimmerman. What
Hmm.
Alyssa taught me, because it touched me where I needed to be touched and opened things in me that I had, um, successfully not looked at,
Sure.
throughout my life, and the time was right. There's a time and a season, and God said, "Now's the time, Gary."
Hmm.
And I was ready. And it,
Absolutely.
and it took being broken open like that in order for me to really enter that process fully.
That's usually how that works, isn't
It
it?
is. It is.
Yep.
It is.
Yeah.
And you don't come to a therapist if you're not in pain,
That is
you're
true.
not hurting.
Yeah, you
So
don't really think about that when life is amazing. You're like, oh, I don't need any help.
yeah. So
Yeah. Anything you want to leave the audience with?
wow, great question. Um, Yeah. Um, this is another thing that I say often to my clients. I say, there's nothing wrong with you. You just don't believe that.
Ah,
I will leave
so
that.
true.
Yes. What you think is not right is what's in the way of you celebrating who you are and really
Mm,
feeling good about your life, and allowing, God to come through you and express himself, as full as he wants to.
yeah. Amen. That is
Yeah.
good, Gary.
Yeah.
Wow. I have loved this conversation. I appreciate you taking the time to share with our audience, and I know they are blessed by it. And I'll put all of Gary's information in the show notes. So if you want to research anything about Gary or reach out to him, you certainly can. So thank you so much for being on today, Gary.
Oh, thank you, Laura. It's been a pleasure.
Yes, and thank you all for listening. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share this with anyone you think who would benefit. I appreciate each and every one of you. God bless and have a beautiful day.